I have your lost daughter with me, ma'am. You need to always keep an eye on her wherever you go. I don't have a daughter, officer. A police officer and a strange girl whom I didn't recognize suddenly came to my house while my husband was away on a business trip. At first, I thought it must be a mistake, and when I told the officer that I didn't have any children, the policeman looked doubtful and asked the little girl, "Isn't she your mother, sweetie?"
No, she's not my mommy. I don't know her.
Isn't this your house, though?
It's not my house, it's…
When the police officer and I saw what the little girl was holding in her hand, we looked at each other, completely astounded as to what was going on. This is the story of how my husband's innocent nature was how he managed to get away with lying to me for a very long time, and how a singular act of kindness coming from a child sent his whole life out of whack completely. My name is Jasmine Fitzgerald, and I'm a 28-year-old worker in the product development department of a local medium-sized company. My husband Ivan, who's the same age as me, and I have known each other since we were college students. And after a very nice relationship, which lasted 3 years, we got married after we graduated. Ivan works in sales for a major company and traveled around the region pretty frequently, sometimes even going so far as the opposite side of the whole country. By contrast, my own job enables me to do a lot of remote work from home, which makes it pretty ideal when it came to balancing the time I spent on my full-time job and taking care of the house. Compared to my own nervous personality that focused perhaps a bit too much on many details, Ivan had a rather more laid-back, go-with-the-flow kind of vibe and was able to socialize with everyone he met with ease. I really respected his communication skills and thus his salesmanship at work. And the fact he could communicate well with someone who was always paranoid about something about myself made me fall for him in the first place. While this sort of personality can rely on himself as well as others when it came to human relationships, it was also a bit of a curse sometimes. By that I mean that he can be a bit rough around the edges, forgetting things and making careless mistakes. I noticed pretty early on when we started dating, he once met me for a date, which he'd actually remembered mere minutes before we were scheduled to meet. And in the hurried commotion that ensued at his house, he'd forgotten his wallet and his phone. This story kinda makes him seem like a golden retriever who would do stupid mistakes in all innocence and cause a problem because of it. And he was genuinely just that sometimes, and I hoped that I, as his wife, would be able to cover for this too careless side of him. We were proud of our compatibility, but our only problem was that even after 7 years of marriage, we didn't have any children yet. We're both leading fulfilling lives, doing the work we loved, but we both knew that both of our parents were longing for grandchildren. Mom and Dad would occasionally urge me to get grandchildren, which was frankly a source of some stress in my life, their good intentions notwithstanding. And although Mr. and Mrs. Fitzgerald were considerate of me and didn't say anything, they seemed to be saying a lot of things to my husband about how much they wanted a grandchild soon.
Jasmine, you probably worked pretty late today, huh? I'll take care of the housework for the day. You go ahead and rest.
I appreciate that for real, but I don't mind doing the laundry and washing the dishes tomorrow.
Oh, hush. I'll do it all. No problem.
Did Mrs. Fitzgerald say something to you again?
Well…
Whenever Ivan was unusually kind to me or helped me with the housework, I know that something must have been said to him by his parents again. Particularly his mother, who was still very much attached to her son. Because of our parents' concerns, I recently applied for complete remote work. Up until then, I sometimes had to go to the office for meetings or go on business trips. So it wasn't possible for me to be home all the time. But just recently, what with the surge of women employees that were also mothers at my workplace had been having at around that time, a new system was initiated that offered full-time remote work for any women who thought she genuinely needed it. When my in-laws heard that I had started working from home, they were happy that this would reduce the burden on me as a working woman and wife and allow me to have more time for child rearing. Then one day, Ivan was sent to go on a business trip for a week. On the day of his departure, he asked me to drive him to the train station. I asked him why, since he usually drove his own car to his destination on business trips. But he told me that he had lost his driver's license. I said in dismay, "When did you lose it?"
I didn't even notice it was gone until yesterday, to be honest with you. Well, I don't usually drive all that much anyway, so...
You're so carefree, Ivan. These things can't be taken very lightly, you know. You'll have to get that reissued soon.
I was going to do that, but I thought it wasn't such a big deal, and that it could wait. For now, though, I'll take the train and a cab to get to my destination, and I'll reissue it when I get back.
I couldn't help but laugh bitterly at his all-too-careless personality. Time passed quickly, and it was the 6th day of his business trip. I was working from home that day, as was the norm by then, when the intercom rang. I answered it to find a police officer with a little girl who looked around 5 years old. What immediately struck me was how unhealthily thin she looked, along with the dirty clothes she was wearing that might as well have been the skin of a roadkill, to be brutally frank. Her blonde hair, which would undoubtedly be beautiful but for the state she was in, was greasy and matted. However, her green, piercingly mesmerizing eyes were very impressive. "What can I do for you, officer?" I asked as I opened the door to Officer Burgess, a middle-aged, tall woman. Picture Letitia Wright, but taller and a little rounder. "I have your lost daughter with me, ma'am. You need to always keep an eye on her wherever you go." I was shocked, but I thought at first that it must be a mistake and said, "I don't have a daughter, officer." The policewoman looked at the girl suspiciously and asked her, "Isn't she your mother, sweetie?"
No, she's not my mommy. I don't know her.
"Isn't this your house, though?"
It's not my house. It's my daddy's house.
Officer Burgess and I looked at each other, completely astounded when we heard the girl's answer. "Why did you bring her to this house?" I asked her, and the policewoman began to explain. The girl was named Kiara, and Officer Burgess told me that she had received a report of a child crying alone in a park nearby. She'd gone to investigate, found the poor girl standing alone, sobbing, and took her into custody. After calming her down with a lollipop, she asked her a few easy questions, and found that she had left her house to deliver something to her father, something he had left behind. She had gotten lost trying to find his house, and she got scared, which was why she started crying. The lost and found item was her father's driver's license, and Officer Burgess took her to the house using the address listed on it. The police officer showed me the driver's license in question. It belonged, without a shadow of a doubt, to my husband, Ivan Fitzgerald. The very same license which he said he had lost. Where was it? I asked Kiara, and she answered,
My house. Daddy left it when he came back home the last time.
Your daddy? You mean this is your daddy? Oh. So what about your mommy? Where is she?
Mommy's out of town. Daddy's busy at work, too. He's not home very often, but he always comes back very soon.
Then who's at your house?
I stay at home by myself all the time. But I thought I'd give this to my daddy, and then I got lost.
If the girl's story was true, then Ivan would be having an affair with another woman and even had an illegitimate child with her. I stood there shocked, stunned by the unbelievable reality. Officer Burgess seemed to have the same impression, and when she asked the girl for her address again to take her home this time, she actually told her her home address and her mother's name, Samantha Cook. Hearing this, I decided to accompany them. As a police officer on duty, she refused to allow me to accompany them because her only job here was to protect a lost child and get her home safely. She was not in a position to witness a potential skirmish breaking out between wife and girlfriend. But I insisted that I had a right to know where my husband's driver's license had been forgotten. So she reluctantly agreed to let me come along. The girl's house was inside an apartment building that looked as though it was built in the 1950s and was poorly maintained for the whole of 70 years. The most obvious detail about it was that it really needed a good paint job, but it wasn't the most concerning. Part of the building had been collapsed in the past, probably due to poor maintenance. It looked as though the shark from Jaws had taken a bite out of it once before deciding it wasn't hungry. Kiara's living quarters were on the opposite side of the building, though, so my paranoid ass was more at ease than it could have been instead. Kiara took a key out from her pocket, unlocked the door, and let us in, where we were met with the closest manifestation of a vortex. The inside of the room was covered, from top to bottom, in garbage. with bags of candy and bread scattered all over the place. The trash can was but a mere suggestion with how many bags of trash were covering it. And the smell was enough to rival a skunk spray. As Officer Burgess and I looked around the room in stunned amazement, Kiara opened the refrigerator, which was somehow still working even in this hellhole, and began to drink orange Fanta and eat white bread. From the way she casually just got everything out and immediately started munching, one could only assume she was pretty accustomed to this lifestyle. This broke my heart. I remembered her clothes were stained and grody, and her skin was flaky and dry. I wondered if she was taking a proper bath. I'm not going to talk about what I saw in the bathroom because, for all I know, there could have been a rotting body somewhere in there. It was an absolutely ghastly sight. I charged out of the bathroom, trembling and holding my mouth. And then I saw a futon laid out on the back of the room, in the midst of the garbage bags and empty aluminum cans. But it was only a child's futon, and there was no sign of an adult sleeping there. I asked Kiara, "When is your mother coming home?"
I don't know.
Do you sleep alone at night?
Yep, I sleep on the futon over there.
Hey, have you been eating good food?
Yep, this is very good bread, you see?
She showed me a bag of stale bread. Officer Burgess was on the phone with a stern look on her face. Apparently she was calling for backup, and so she should. There was no way we were leaving this girl in a room in this condition, and from what I could see, Kiara's mother must have left the poor child alone for a few days at least. Soon, police backup arrived, several of them female officers. This girl was to be taken into police custody for the time being, until Kiara's mother was located and consulted with. Kiara was led into the police car again, but she didn't look scared. She instead looked rather cheerful. Even at a young age, she must have sensed that she was in danger. And now she knew she was getting the help she needed. Another potential thought that came to mind at that point was that she may have been looking for her father's house at random because she was anxious about being left alone in a collapsing landfill. The police told me they would take me home under the condition that I promised to contact my husband later on to find out when he would be coming home. When we were all about to leave, the girl suddenly pointed out the window and squealed. I looked in the direction she pointed and saw a woman acting suspiciously. And when she noticed the police officers looking in her direction, she tried to run away.
Hold it right there!
The woman, allegedly called Samantha Cook, was chased by several police officers and quickly subdued, and they brought her back to the building to be taken away. She shouted,
Hey, I didn't do anything!
It's because you didn't do anything that's the problem, ma'am. Just how many days did you leave your child unattended?
What? Did the Child Welfare Department report again?
So apparently the woman had received several interventions from the Child Guidance Center, which was most likely why she thought she and the police officer that had caught her had this exchange. And then she was put in the police car. I had some questions I really wanted to ask her, so I tapped on the glass of the window of the police car in which she was being loaded. So, this driver's license was found in your house apparently, but could you care to explain why?
What's this? Oh, it's Ivan's. Ivan is let's say he's my fiancé-to-be. Looks like he forgot it when he stopped by last time.
Is Ivan her father?
Yep, but who are you to ask these questions? Are you an officer too?
No, I'm Ivan's wife, Jasmine Fitzgerald. Pleasure to meet you.
What?
She was taken away in a police car with a stunned look on her face. When I got home, before I called Ivan, I called my in-laws and told them what happened today. They were surprised and didn't believe me right away. But they agreed to meet their son when he got home. I told my parents what had happened and that I was getting a divorce, and they kindly told me they would arrange for a lawyer. After that, Ivan called me and asked me in a carefree manner what souvenir I would like to bring back home the next day. I don't need anything, Ivan. Thanks. What time are you coming home tomorrow? I'll pick you up.
You will? Damn, that would help me a lot. Thanks a bunch, Jasmine. What would I do without you?
I didn't say anything more to my husband, but checked his return time and called the police to inform them of when to head to my house. He was in a good mood when he got into the car the next evening, unaware of what was eagerly awaiting his return. When he saw multiple pairs of shoes in the foyer of our house, he looked at me suspiciously.
What? Do we have a few visitors?
Yes, we have a few guests. Go on in. I motioned for him to go into the living room, which was already occupied by my in-laws, my attorney, and Officer Burgess, among other officers. Ivan walked into the living room to be greeted by everyone, including Kiara. When he noticed her, he stopped moving, a look of genuine terror on his face that came with the dawning realization of what was going on. He turned around, opened his eyes wide, and glared at me. I told him blatantly, "We know everything. Give in now and save yourself from something worse." Kiara saw Ivan and ran to him. He frowned as he pretended to chase her away with his hand while his own daughter came up to him.
You freaking ruined us all!
He said. The poor girl was so shocked that she started to cry. I was speechless at the sight of my husband's disgusting behavior. A different female police officer calmly took the girl to the kitchen. Meanwhile, Mr. Fitzgerald stood up and grabbed his son's collar.
You cheated on your wife and even had a child with your stupid lover? Do you realize what you've done?
Looks like I raised you wrong. Ivan fell to the floor as the fist of his father met him with pure, heartfelt fury. His mother began to cry. Even under such hopeless circumstances, my husband started making insensitive excuses to me.
I thought I had to tell you sometime, but I thought I could wait. If I told you, you'd divorce me, right? And that spelled disaster for me.
How much longer were you going to wait, Ivan?
We've been doing so well. Everything was great between us. How in the world did this happen?
Kiara came to the house with Officer Burgess to deliver your driver's license, which you apparently forgot at her excuse of a home.
License? What the actual frick?
Mr. Fitzgerald proceeded to yell at the now angry husband, who showed no signs of remorse about his actions.
Enough! You bastard! Don't you have any sense of responsibility? I thought I'd raised you well enough to at least be responsible in the face of defeat.
My father-in-law, his face bright red in the moonlight, leaned over Ivan and continued to tighten his grip on him.
Stop it! Don't bully my daddy!
Before anyone knew what had happened, Kiara had escaped the kitchen and was hugging her father to protect him. The female police officer also pulled Mr. Fitzgerald away from his struggling son in a soothing manner. Kiara, crying, clung to her father, whose nose was bleeding. The girl's arms were thin, flimsy, and painfully discolored by malnourishment. Officer Burgess and her team then left with the girl after confirming the relationship between Ivan and Samantha Cook. Officer Burgess herself explained that the girl would be taken into temporary custody at a children's shelter until the following legal affairs would be taken care of. That's when my lawyer spoke up for the first time.
Mr. Gerald, my client wants a divorce, and wishes to proceed with the legalities. I advise a divorce by mutual consent is the best way to settle this matter, but, should you resist, there's always going to court as well.
Ivan looked puzzled and said,
Oh no. That means I have to pay alimony, doesn't it?
I yelled back at my husband for his insolent attitude. Doesn't it? Of course it does. Do you realize how many years you've been betraying me? I'll make you take full responsibility for your stupid negligence and your infidelity and make you pay for it.
Oh, please, no. Give me a break. Please? I have a child and her mother to support, so I just can't afford it.
When my husband started making excuses like that, his father gave him a murderous look.
What are you talking about? I heard from the police, you piece of shit. You and your stupid girlfriend have been neglecting your child, haven't you? The poor thing is so skinny and probably hasn't had a proper bath in months. That's Samantha's fault, isn't it? Why am I to blame?
Unable to listen to Ivan's irresponsible arguments, I left the situation to my lawyer and began preparing to leave the house. I could hear my husband protesting vehemently against the proposed $50,000 in alimony from my lawyer, but I had nothing more to say to him, so I left the place. A few days later, I was back at my parents' house when my in-laws came to apologize. My parents were present and asked how my husband was doing, and they could only report that he was still putting up a fight against getting a divorce and showed no signs of remorse whatsoever. The woman whom he'd had an affair with had believed him when he said he would divorce his wife and marry her instead, so she gave birth to their daughter. However, because of her fiancé-to-be's tendency to procrastinate on bothersome things until later, this period of waiting on her part went on longer than expected. And since she inherently didn't like children, she didn't take good care of her child. The fact that Kiara hadn't had any medical checkups and required vaccinations should emphasize how truly negligent she was. Because of this, the Child Guidance Center repeatedly referred the family to authorities as a problematic mother-child relationship. The woman always went out to meet Ivan or even accompanied him on business trips in the past and often left the child at home alone for a few days at a time. The longest was apparently 2 weeks. Somehow that incident went by unnoticed, while this one brought the family to the attention of the police. The in-laws apologized repeatedly to me and my parents for raising their son wrong, as they claim, and promised to make sure that he would agree to all the terms of the divorce. They also said they would make sure the girl would be given proper parenting by Ivan and his lover until Kiara reached adulthood. Mr. and Mrs. Fitzgerald, along with a few acquaintances in the lawyer and police industries, would personally see to it that Kiara got the proper food, shelter, and schooling to give her a bright future. Kiara herself is still in a children's shelter as of now, but as soon as she's ready, Ivan plans to take her in and recognize himself as her father. Sometime later, I received a report from my lawyer that the divorce had been finalized and that a lump payment of $60,000 in alimony was in order. The alimony was a lot of money for my ex-husband, but the condition was that any demands of alimony from Samantha be waived. Because of the fact she was jobless and because of his family's living conditions. I was dissatisfied with not punishing the woman whom he had an affair with, but my lawyer told me that it would be better to end it on those terms because she was poor, unhealthy, and had poor judgment to take proper care of herself, much less her daughter. And it would be a waste of time to negotiate with her. I remembered the messy room with Kiara getting a can of soda and white bread, and I didn't want to negotiate with someone who made their daughter live like that, so I decided to follow my lawyer's advice. Thus, I was able to finish all the legalities related to the divorce. The events of just a few weeks after I learned of my ex-husband's betrayal, whom I had trusted for more than a decade at this point, seemed so long. But when it was all over, I felt surprisingly exhilarated. From now on, I hope to live an honest life while working hard at a job I love. Now my days are pretty much exactly the same as always, except for 2 things. A nice new apartment thanks to the alimony, and being single again. I want to enjoy my time free from any relationship responsibilities for a while, but I do hope to start my own family sometime soon.